Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience series, centered on resilient parenting, cultivating your child's resilience. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, hi, I'm Tanya, and this show is an 11-part series digging deep into the Rise framework, covering the 4 core pieces of Rise, Wellness, and Resilience. This includes, first, R, relationships, how relationships and experience influence a child's resilience. Secondly, I, indicators of well-being, how we integrate research-informed elements to enhance the well-being of children. Third, S, social-emotional development, how we can increase the emotional intelligence of children through everyday interactions. And lastly, E, enhancements, how we can interconnect the whole child to offer the greatest opportunity for wellness and resilience. When we cultivate a child's wellness and resilience, we offer a bright place for children to rise. Rise through difficulty, rise through struggle, rise with the means to manage, restore, and grow. So, as a wife, mother, aunt, sister, daughter, and friend to many parents, I am thankful you are joining on this learning journey with me. For today's topic, we are covering relational rhythms, an element of the social and emotional development section of the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience framework. You'll be hearing from Joella Gerber, clinician supervisor for Tanager's outpatient clinic. Welcome, Joella.
Thanks, Tanya, for having me.
Joella, you're joining us today as a therapist, an aunt, a fierce advocate for children and families, and with a lot of expertise as it relates to wellness and kids' mental health. So tell me a little bit about relational rhythms. What does this mean for parents who are working to cultivate this in their own child's life?
So when we talk about relational rhythms, we're talking about any interactions that we have with others. So any of those interpersonal connections we have. And really those can be in our family relationships, in our social relationships, and are all about things like, what are our verbal and nonverbal communication like? What is it like when we have conflict? How do we figure that out? What is it like for me to understand you and for you to understand me? And one of the really cool things about the way that those relational rhythms work is they start to develop from birth and really from our youngest age.
Wow, so this word relational rhythms felt a little like intimidating. Like, what did this mean? But it seems more simple when you explain it like that, Joella, that it's from this very young age and throughout development, this way that we relationally move back and forth. Because it sounds like you said, like, not everything is perfect all the time, but it's the way we navigate almost that relationship throughout time. And I hear you say that this develops at birth. What does that mean?
Yeah. So again, one of the really cool things about humans is that we are made to be relational beings. And so from day one, we are in relationship with another person, right? If you think of that little tiny baby, they can't do anything for themselves, really. They really depend on the relationship that they have with that caregiver. So when the baby cries, the caregiver comes and takes care of them and helps them feel better. When that baby is feeling distressed, they really rely on someone else to take care of them and soothe them. And when we have that ideal sort of relationship where the need is expressed by that baby and the caregiver comes and meets that need, that's what we call attachment, or that in the most ideal sense, that secure attachment. So we are seeing sort of that need being met. So I think of my little 8-week nephew, Oliver. He can't do anything really by himself. He did kind of roll over once by himself, but really what he needs is every time that he's hungry, he cries, and my sister comes and feeds him and gives them that nurture. When he has a wet diaper, he cries, and she comes and changes him. So really that's starting to build that give and take of, like, I have a need, I express it, and someone comes and takes care of me. And at that, that's building the foundation for a secure attachment relationship.
And it's really that we're aiming for that secure attachment that lays almost what I hear you say is that foundation for those healthy relational rhythms and those rhythms that we want to be developing in a child's life over time.
Yeah, it really, we're aiming for that ideal, that secure attachment that's really going to lay the foundation for healthy relationships moving forward.
Joella, what I'm curious about and want to learn a little bit more about is how those acts of care, like those moments in which you talk about almost building that attachment, impacts like a child's development. I'm guessing it impacts their beliefs, what they think about themselves, what they think about others within relationships. I'm sure that's different, like depending on the age, but what does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah. So really through those early experiences that we have with our caregiver, we're already starting to develop beliefs about ourselves and about others and about the world. And so those sort of beliefs will follow us throughout our lives and kind of set the foundation for what we believe that relationships will hold for us in the future. So in that ideal attachment relationship, we really see three key components of what we believe about ourselves and about others forms. So the first is trust. So trust says, I know that people who care about me will take care of me when I need it. And so Oliver knows that people, if he has a need, somebody's going to come and meet that need, that I can trust that other people will be comforting and caring for me. The next thing is self-worth. So self-worth says I matter and what I have to say matters. So when I cry, it matters to someone else and those words make a difference, that someone is going to come and take care of me. So as we get older, we see that when people have that self-belief of mattering, then they say, I should speak. I should have those things to say because I matter to someone. I can set boundaries with others because what I need and my needs matter. And then that third piece is self-efficacy. So the knowledge that when I cry as an infant, someone's going to come and take care of me, or my words or my thoughts, my feelings can affect some sort of change. And so when we can think about that in an infant or a child, that they'll keep crying because they know that someone's going to come take care of me. Well, later in life, we see I'm going to ask for something that I need from someone because I know that my words matter and that they can affect change. So I believe that something will change because of what I say. Or I can set a boundary because I know that it will have some sort of purpose.
Wow, this is such important information, Joella. And I think about all the pieces you talked about, and I think about it for my own kids. I think about it in my own life, and like all of these pieces influence relationships, right? My ability to trust, my own sense of self-worth, my ability to have boundaries or limits, or to advocate or have this sense of self-efficacy. Like all of those things are going to influence my relational rhythms, right? The way I navigate and have relationships. This is really great. I'm excited for when we return, Joel, to just dive deeper into when our relationships have bumpy times, right? When the rhythm is a little shaky, what do we do? So more to come.
Tanager Place is here for children, teens, young adults, and families as they navigate the many stressors of the world today. Tanager inspires, empowers, and heals by providing tools and support needed to navigate the hardships of life and overcome obstacles. Our expertise and specialty trainings offer a wide range of approaches, and we'll join alongside you to create solutions to enhance your wellness. We are here for you and your family, virtually or in person. Tanager Place, your child, our focus.
So Joella, we just learned about relational rhythms and all of the interconnections with that. So tell me a little bit, what do we do when those rhythms are not maybe harmonizing?
Yeah. Well, of course, there are always going to be times in our lives where those relational rhythms get off, and we might see effects down the road from that behaviorally or emotionally. But for parents out there who are listening and are saying, wow, like I did not have a great childhood, or maybe I didn't give my kid the greatest childhood they needed, we're not doomed. So there are things that we can do to change those things.
Wow, that's hopeful. That gives me this concept of, maybe even if I struggled for a brief period of time, maybe I had postpartum depression, or maybe I went through a really hard year, or maybe I and my spouse got a divorce and things weren't the ideal that I want for my family, that there's always almost this place that you can find hope and start anew. So if we're talking about when things go well in those early relationships, or if a child is securely attached, what happens if things don't go in the most ideal way?
Yeah. So really, in reality, only about 50 to 60% of the U.S. population is what we consider securely attached. And so what that means is there are lots and lots of people in our world who are not securely attached and still living great, meaningful lives. So while secure attachment is the gold standard, it doesn't doom us if we, through discerning or through counseling or whatever, learn that we're not securely attached. And there can be lots of reasons that kids maybe don't have that ideal early childhood experience. Sometimes kids who spend time in the NICU, they don't have that sort of nurturing that they initially want, or it's through an incubator, or some of their first experiences of touch are being prodded with needles or having IVs put in, or maybe kind of like you mentioned, a mom who has postpartum depression, and so it makes that connection really difficult. Or maybe it could even be like there's already a lot going on in families, and sometimes parents don't have the emotional or time or physical capacity to be there in every way that they want for their child. And that's okay. That is part of life. But it does mean that we might see some behavioral emotional challenges for that child. Maybe they have increased anxiety. Maybe they have poor social skills. Maybe they have separation anxiety and have a hard time being away from their parents. Maybe they have really poor regulation. So there are consequences down the road or things that might happen. And that doesn't only stop in childhood, that can also lead into adulthood. So maybe a parent listening is like, oh man, some of those like behavioral things or emotional things really sound like they could have been me as a kid and now. And so we also know that not having that secure attachment impacts adults as well. So we might see with adults they're emotionally closed off, or they have lots of anger and resentment toward their parents. Maybe they have a hard time connecting with their own child and aren't really sure why. Those can all sort of come from the challenges that occur in an early attachment relationship.
But one of the things I've heard you say, Joel, and I think is such an important message for others to hear, is that we don't have to have shame attached to this. Mm-hmm. We don't. It doesn't have to be connected to guilt. That there's this recognition: hard things have happened in my life or in my child's life, mm-hmm. but there's resilience. There's wellness. We can cultivate this attachment in this relationship that we're looking for. There's hope, mm-hmm. right? Yes. There's this strong message in the midst of that, is that there's a reality that there are kids and humans walking amongst this world. If I heard your percentage, like 40 to 50%. Mm-hmm. But every day is a new opportunity, and mm-hmm. we can cultivate and create new experiences in their brain. Is that right?
Yeah. So one really cool thing about our brain is it has this property called neuroplasticity, which is a big fancy word for meaning like your brain can change. So I often think of it this way. We live in Iowa, right? So we drive down these country roads, and there's often like 2 ruts in the road where your tire automatically goes. And you might be able to drive out of those ruts, but it takes a little extra work, right? And so that's kind of the way that our behavior and the way that we naturally relate with other people based on our past works is in our brain. We kind of have these natural rhythms or ruts that we go in. And just like on a road, you can drive out of those and create a new rut. It just takes lots of times and lots of experiences of driving outside of the ruts or changing your neural pathways or doing something different for that to become the new norm or relational rhythm.
So practice.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So Joel, what are caregivers supposed to do after they may notice some relational rhythms that are not ideal or not what they want to see for their child?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I always encourage the parents and caregivers that I work with to do is to be really honest with themselves about what their own past has been like. What were some of their early relational rhythms? What are some of the things that maybe they haven't really thought about in the way that they interact with others or with their children even, and think about where did those come from. So for myself, In my family, like, we do not do conflict. My brothers literally like get up and leave the room if like even a little bit of conflict happens. And so for myself, when I can be really honest with myself about, okay, like conflict is really hard for me, and instead of finding myself just leaving the room, I can intentionally say like, I'm gonna do something to change this. Yeah. And for some parents that might mean that they need some extra help in noticing those things. So maybe asking people around them what sort of patterns they see. But also for parents, they can look at what their own child is like. What are their child's relational rhythms like? And how do they think that maybe that has, their own parenting has had an impact on that? And knowing that those things can be changed as well.
I like that concept to think about ways to be curious about my own past. And I know Maggie will talk about that in the U intervention, but then recognizing that we sometimes then create or perpetuate those same patterns because that's what our brains do, right? That's what we know. So what I hear you saying though, is that I can then be curious about my child's patterns and things that I see, like, are they uncomfortable in certain situations? Do they get mad with certain peers more easily? Just like paying attention to tendencies or patterns within relationships.
Yeah.
Are there any resources or things parents can go to work on that curiosity or notice those things?
Yeah. So if a parent kind of recognizes, like, maybe for themselves, they're like, oh, maybe I didn't have that ideal, like, early childhood, or I'm noticing some things in my child. One book that I find really helpful is called The Connected Child. It's by Dr. Karen Purvis, Dr. David Cross, and Wendy Lyons-Sunshine, I believe is her name. But it just talks about the ways that attachment forms, what are those different attachment needs for the different attachment styles, and really give some practical tools and help to think about, how do I change myself, how do I change my family or my relational rhythms as well. And one of the really cool things is that with kids, we learn so much about what it means to be in a relationship from our parents. So I'm sure all of us, for better or worse, have times where like, oh, I sounded just like my mom, or like, oh, that mannerism is just like my dad. And so parents have a really cool opportunity to then make changes within their relationships with their kids that can help build a more healthy, functioning, adaptive sort of relational pattern.
Yeah, I'm guessing one of the things that is important for me to reflect on as a parent is that my kids' relational rhythms will probably look similar to how they've seen me have relational rhythms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just reflecting on, even when it's hard and I might want to yell at their dad about something, that they pick up on those things. Mm-hmm. And so how can I be aware of the tendencies that I do that I want my kids to have and to cultivate versus the ones that I'm like, don't act like mom in that situation.
Right.
I'm guessing it's probably okay to simply say too, mommy didn't do that the best. Mm-hmm. I could do that different. Mommy's going to say sorry to daddy.
Yes. Yeah. Those are excellent examples of a way that you can adjust that relational rhythm.
Good. Well, I'm excited. This is really good information. And the concept of relational rhythms, I love the idea of it being a rhythm, because there are times that I'm in my groove and I'm feeling so good as a parent. And there are times that I'm like, we are not syncing right now, buddy. Like our energies are off, bud. Like we need a reset, in our house. Me and one of my child has like a symbol for a reset, meaning that we're not in our greatest state and we just are going to hug for 30 seconds and we're going to reset. So this stuff is just validating and feeling good about this. These are ways we can cultivate those positive relational rhythms. When we come back, I'm really curious to dive further into how can I develop this in my kiddos? What can I do? What can we learn about in order to continue to do this, in order to honor and cultivate our kids' wellness and resilience? More to come.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager Place is here for you. Our team of specialists in mental, emotional, behavioral, and social health want to join alongside you during these tough times. Tanager will offer the tools needed to inspire, empower, and heal while providing the support you need to build the strongest foundation for success and wellness. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager Place, your child, our focus.
Jolo, we've learned what relational rhythms are, and that even if we struggle in relationships, there are always opportunities to take a different direction, to reset, to do over, if you will. So tell me, how can I cultivate better relational rhythms in my child's life?
Yeah. So through using intentional, fun, repetitive relational patterns and rhythms, we really have the opportunity to build some really cool relational bonds. And I think one of the really cool things is it doesn't have to be things that are way outside of what families are already doing or adding a whole nother burden to their life.
So what are some of those ways that families can build these relational rhythms, if you will, into everyday living?
Yeah. So lots of families say to me, like, Joella, we don't have time to add like 50 million things to make our relationship special.
I feel that sentiment.
Yes, yeah. So like I said earlier, because our brains are already wired for relationships, The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and by Tina Payne Bryson give some really helpful tools for how do we already capitalize on the things we're doing already as families or in our relationships, but really get the biggest bang for our buck. So one of those things is just in the things we're already doing is making those really enjoyable times together. So whether that is spending 15 minutes playing together every day, whether that is every Friday night is movie and popcorn, or one of my favorites is making like a whole house dance party when we're cleaning. All of those things really help take the mundane things of everyday life, but make those into really fun activities that build our relationships and help us to come together better. Another really cool piece is just creating rituals within our families. So rituals are these ideas of things that are routine, but not just routine, have an additional sort of relational intent behind them. So whether that is every night at dinner, we ask the same question of asking for a rose and a thorn or a happy and a crappy from your day. And everybody listens and everybody gets to share. Or if it's singing a special lullaby at bedtime. So I think of when I'm with my niece, I sing her a special Aunt Joella lullaby every night. And that is sort of like our ritual together. That is that special thing. It's a routine because we always do it when we're together, but it adds that extra special thing beyond what like brushing our teeth is.
Yeah, are there any resources that give tips, like any books about those things? Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So a book called I Love You Rituals has a whole list of different ideas for different age groups and different times of the day that you can really build in some of those rituals into things you're already doing.
Joella, what about in families where having fun can be hard? Because maybe there's a lot of conflict or there's situations that come up and yelling was happening or fighting was happening. What do I do then, right? What do I do in those moments where conflict seems to just run through the evening routine, no matter what we try to do? Is there something I can do to be helping those situations?
Yeah. So the reality of relationships is that relationships have conflict in them. So we also learn healthy relational rhythms through how we do conflict. So as I talked about in my family of origin growing up, not doing conflict is not a healthy way to handle conflict, right? So there are all sorts of things that we can do to kind of teach some of those positive conflict skills and still have good relationships. So from a young age, we can start that from even just in the games we play. We teach taking turns. We teach if you have a disagreement during the game, figuring out a good way to figure out how do we deal with that disagreement. As we get older, we can teach some of those skills more explicitly. We can practice those empathy skills. We can play a game at the grocery store where we see someone walking down the aisle and we notice that they have a certain look on their face. We can make some guesses and practice empathy, understanding what other people are feeling in that. So those are just a few of the fun ways, but parents also have a really sweet opportunity to get to model for kids what it looks like to apologize when there's a wrong, how to ask for forgiveness, and how to repair a relationship. And when we talk about repair, we're not just talking about like saying I'm sorry and then we're done and nothing changes. repair means, because when we have conflict, there's probably some sort of relational breach or wound that has happened. So when we talk about repair, we're thinking about how do we go back and right that wrong and right the relationship. So that might mean asking, what do I need to do to help you feel better in this relationship? How can I show you that I really care for you? And as parents can model that, then kids learn how to do that in a way that's healthier.
So what I hear you saying almost is that there are times that I am going to struggle as a parent. I'm going to lose my cool. And so if I say, guys, mommy lost her cool. I was frustrated. I should have taken deep breaths. I am sorry. But almost a step further, like, I am sorry, and is there anything I can do to make this better? Mm-hmm. Or how can we work through this together? And it's kind of this honor of like, we're in this together. We're a relationship. We're invested in each other and we're figuring this out. And that almost opens then an invitation for the child when they are making mistakes or things happen to them, that they can come back to the relationship. That's the beautiful thing of working through the hard times relationally.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like we said, the relationships are the beautiful times and the really hard times, and they're holistic. And when we have those rhythms, we're able to kind of navigate that in a better way.
Yeah, I love that. It's just reminding myself that apologizing is okay. Mm-hmm. We have to swallow our pride sometimes as parents, you know, right. There's so much frustration. And so I have to remind myself, like, I am the constant model for my kiddo. Mm-hmm. So though I'm frustrated and I want to be right here, it's not about that. It's about shaking it off and trying to be the best role model I can to cultivate this in my kids so that they have a lifetime opportunity of wellness and resilience for themselves. Because I think that's what we all want as parents.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Joella, I am just inspired and motivated by learning this information. I think you have left me with a lot of things to think about and reflect on. If there were 1 to 2 key takeaways that you wanted those listening, whether it's a caregiver, a grandparent, an aunt, to walk away knowing, what would it be?
Yeah. I think first I would say that the relationships that we as individuals have with the children in our care are really important for setting them up for success and resiliency in their own life. So being mindful of the way that that relationship looks is really important. And then the other piece that I would say is then the way that you build those relationships in good and healthy ways is through sort of those fun, interactive, repetitive sort of patterns of relationally being together that really is going to set up kids for future relationships that are really healthy and what we want them to be.
Reminding myself as a grown-up to be silly and to be fun, right?
Yes.
To bring out the inner child in me. Mm-hmm. Well, good. Thank you so much, Joella, for joining us today and for sharing your wealth of knowledge and expertise. Thank you for being with us and taking time out of your day to learn alongside us in order to offer a bright place for the children in your lives to rise. Today's series brought to you by Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website at www.tanagerplace.org.